If you ever thought old Victorian era photography of people were creepy and lifeless looking, well, it's about to get creepier. So there was a cultural phenomenon that occurred in the mid to late 1800s in the world of portrait photography. That to the 21st century viewer, without knowing the context, it would just confuse the hell out of you. I know when I first saw this, I was like, what the hell is this about? Well, some of you may know that back in the day, photography was a little different. There were no smartphones or Instagram, and photos took more than a fraction of a second to expose. Back in the Victorian era, when you wanted your portrait taken, you would get dressed up all fancy and go to a photography studio. But in the early days of photography, even the brightest lit photo studios require the sitter to sit for at least half a minute for the photograph to properly expose. And this is even annoying to do for a full-grown adult, let alone a child. And if you've ever tried to take a photograph of a child, even with your fancy 21st century smartphone, you know it's impossible because they never stop moving. So people resorted to many different tactics to get a kid to stop moving. Usually during group or family portraits, an adult relative would hold the baby or infant still during the taking of the photograph, but they still wiggled and blinked all the time. So oftentimes they would also drug the kid. You know, a little bit of opium, never hurt anybody. I really especially like this kid. I mean, like, there's just no words. There was also a technicality in how photography studios charged their customers. They would often have a fixed rate per person, and photography was still relatively new at the time. Most people could only afford to have one person in the photograph, and usually parents, especially those with newborns, would want their kid to be the one in the photograph. And that's where these disturbing ghostly figures come in. The child's mother would often hold the kid and while they're disguising themselves as something else, although it's not always the mother, sometimes it's the father, sometimes it's another relative, and often studio employees would end up being the one holding the kid. These adults would disguise themselves as either the background drapery or a piece of furniture, often with a bedsheet over them, and they're usually trying to be a chair. So then sometimes the photographer would actually take a photograph with the person, the adult in it, and later would scratch them out during development. And that's how you end up with these photographs of faceless bodies that look like the Grim Reaper. So then some people don't even try. They just stick their hand out and grab the kid by the neck or something. And that's how you end up with also photographs of what looks like someone's trying to strangle a kid. So, because I'm sure some of these children were a handful, and you really had to press down very hard to keep them still. We look at these images now and see them as strange, yet at the time people not only probably saw these as normal, but were quite excited to share them among family and friends, just like how excited we get sharing our photographs on Instagram and Facebook. I mean, I still don't get why people take photographs of food, but maybe one of you can explain it to me. So what cultural phenomenon that has occurred in recent years do you think will seem odd and baffling to someone living in a different time? Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to hear more about weird, peculiar, funny, and interesting art, please click the subscribe button.